Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I hope that you are all good. Now today's video is a little bit different to normal for me, as I'm going to be trying a polygel for the first time. So here I have a Model Ones a polygel kit. This particular one is called their Sexy Mix kit. So I thought I would unbox it with you guys first of all. So it comes packaged really well. Here we have some polygel instructions on how to use it if you were using the dual forms. Now I'm not going to be using the dual forms today. I'm just going to do a set on my Glamerliz just because I wanted to get a bit of a feel for the product before I go and try and do it on myself. So in the kit you get those dual forms, a pack of 6 glitters, some sculpting forms. I've used these sculpting forms before and they are actually quite nice. We also have some dried flowers, which I'm going to use further along in the set, or in the video, sorry. Then we have some crystals. Now I tend to not really use these kind of crystals, but things like this I've just been popping in a box and putting away to hopefully do a giveaway in the future. Then we've got some striping tape. Now I love striping tape, but I do find it a little bit fiddly, so I'm not going to use that one today. Then we've got some tweezers. I quite liked these tweezers actually. I used them to pick up the dried flowers and they were nice. Then we've got one of the 100-180 grit files. And then we have the polygel brush, and this is your classic polygel brush. So it's a brush on one end and the spatula on another. Now I do have another polygel brush that I use for gel polish application or gel application, but I quite like this one because it's a little bit longer than that one, so I found it a little bit easier to use. And then you've got the classic spatula on the other end. And then let's move on and take a look at the products. So you have a base and top coat. I quite like the bottles of these ones. I love the matte effect to anything shiny. And then we've also got the polygel slip solution. And lastly, we have what I was most excited to try, and that is the polygel itself. So you get 3 different colours in 10-gram tubes. So we've got a pink, a clear and a white. So moving on to the set of nails that we're going to do, I'm working on my Glamerliz practice hand, and I've just applied some base tips and give them a buff just to make sure that the products adhere nicely. And then I'm going to come in and apply the base coat that I showed you guys. Now, obviously, if you're doing this on yourself, it would be a little bit different. You'd just apply the base coat to your natural nails. But because I'm working on a practice hand, I decided to apply it to all of the tip, just because of the fact that sometimes gel-based products can have a trouble adhering to plastic tips. So it's just, I personally prefer to come in with a layer of base coat. Sometimes it can seem a little bit of a waste of product, but I wanted to use all of this system together to see how easy and how well it worked. So I'm just going to apply a thin coat of the base coat and then pop these in to cure for 60 seconds. And then I'm going to start off with the pink polygel. Now the pink is more of a sheer glassy pink rather than a cover pink, to be honest. Now I usually prefer a more cover pink style product because then I feel that they're more versatile because you can use them for things like French nails, but it is still a really pretty pink. So as you see, I squeezed some out onto the spatula and then placed that down on the nail, and then I've dampened my brush with that slip solution, and I'm just kind of patting into the product. I've never used polygel before. Like I said, this was my first time using it. I've watched a few YouTube videos and really wanted to give it a go, but this was my first time working with it. So I was completely like, okay, how do you work with this? And I'm more of an acrylic girl, as I've said in a lot of my videos. So I kind of, whenever I pick up anything nail-wise, I want to work with it like I would work with acrylic. So that would be more patting and pulling it down the nail, which was a little bit tricky, I suppose, to do with the polygel. It's just a little bit different. Obviously, a new product, you've got to get used to the application. But I found that this colour applied absolutely beautifully. I was patting and pressing it down the nail and it was going where I wanted to be, and I was really, really impressed. But then once I'd cured it, I looked at it and I see that I'd got quite a few bubbles in it, and that, you know, the product's completely new to me. So I was a bit like, okay, obviously I've worked with it a little bit too fast and just not took my time with it to make sure that there was no bubbles in it before curing. So when I move on to the next nail, I'd picked up a little bit of experience, so it went a little bit better, if that makes sense. So further along in the video, I did decide to cover up the pointer finger with some sugared glitter just so you don't see those air bubbles in my picture. But moving on to the second nail. So on this nail, I wanted to encapsulate some flowers. So I popped down a small bead of the clear polygel. I don't know if you'd call it a bead, like I said, I'm used to working with acrylic, so I would say a bead of acrylic. So we'll just keep with a bead of polygel. But I've popped that down and I'm simply patting it out. And this time I was making sure to check that if there was any air bubbles, I burst them just by pressing onto them a little bit. I'm just walking that down towards the free edge, just so that there's a super thin layer of the product so that I can stick those flowers on. I just needed to come in with a little bit more just to make sure that the tip area was fully covered. Again, when you're working with a new product, it's really hard to gauge how much to use. But as you can see, I'm simply pressing this into place, making sure that it fully covers those side walls. And I also wanted to try and get the layer of polygel as even as possible. And then I'm going to leave this wet, so I'm not going to pop this into cure. I want to be able to stick those flowers into the tackiness of the gel product. So I haven't popped it into cure yet. I'm just making sure it's nice and neat around that cuticle area and making sure that there's enough product at the side walls. And then I'm picking up the dried flowers from the kit and I'm simply pressing them down into the polygel. I didn't want to press them down too much because I didn't want to move the polygel around too much, but just being able to press them down made them a lot easier to apply than when, say, I'd apply them on acrylic, because on acrylic, by the time you've applied that first thin clear layer, it's already set by the time you're coming in with your products like flowers. So it can be a little bit tricky to press dried flowers down into acrylic, but it was really easy to do with the polygel. Then before popping it into cure, I felt as though it kind of looked a little bit plain with just the flowers on there. So I'm picking up some glitter pieces and again, just simply pressing them slightly down into that clear layer of polygel. This is all still wet at the moment. I've not popped it into cure yet. And I just went for an iridescent glitter because I wanted to see how clear the nail would look with the polygel. So I kind of wanted to go for that glass effect. And I also didn't want to draw too much attention away from the flowers. And then once I was happy with how the glitter was all placed, I popped this into cure for a full 60 seconds. And now we're going to come in and encapsulate. So I'm using that same clear polygel, picking up a medium-sized bead of the product, placing it down on the nail. And this was something I struggled with. I was kind of like, how do you get it off of the spatula? It was a learning curve, to say the least, doing this set of nails, but I really had fun trying a new product. I've been using acrylic, obviously I use gel polish as well, but other than that I mainly only use acrylic, so it was really fun to try a different system, and polygel is something that I've wanted to try for ages. So now that I have a little kit to play around with, I'm definitely going to try and do some more polygel nails. I definitely want to give it a go on myself to see how well they last. But all I'm doing with this clear layer is patting it and walking it down the nail. At this point, because I'm encapsulating, I'm also wanting to build the structure up of the nail. So I've left a lot of the product down in the back third area to build up the apex. And then I'm making sure to really press this over the flowers and making sure that it gets into any of the grooves, just so that there's no air bubbles between the flowers or the bottom layer of a polygel and the top layer. And I was trying to be really conscious as well of how much of the slip solution I was adding to the polygel, because I had heard in other videos it's advisable not to use too much. So I kind of was trying to just dip into that slip solution whenever I felt as though the polygel was a bit too sticky and starting to stick to my brush. But I do have to admit, I found it quite easy to work with. Obviously this set of nails is very, very far from perfect, but it wasn't like when you first pick up acrylic and it's so tricky to master. It was a lot easier to play around with. So I definitely would recommend this as a beginner step to doing nails. Like if you're looking to do your own nails at home, I definitely would recommend getting some training in it first, because obviously it's always best to try out a product when you've got a little bit of knowledge on how to use it. But it was really easy to pick up and just start working with. Now on this nail, I decided I would try and do a marble. Marbles are one of my absolute favourite things to do in nails, whether it's with acrylic, builder gel or gel polish. I absolutely love marble nails. So I felt as though I had to give this a go. So I've picked up a thin layer of the pink, and like I applied that thin clear layer, I'm just popping down a really thin layer of the pink to begin with, just so that I could marble the white through this. So I'm just patting that into place like I did before, trying to make sure it's nice and neat at the side walls. And then I'm going to leave that uncured and marble my white through it. And also, one of the other things I wanted to say, it was so easy to get a nice neat cuticle area with the polygel, as because it's quite thick, it didn't run around like other products can. It just stayed where I put it down, so I was able to really easily push it up into the cuticle area, get it nice and close without worrying about flooding the cuticle. Moving on to doing that marble, I've popped some of the white polygel down on my spatula, and then I'm just using an orange wood stick to run it through the pink. I've never even watched a video on polygel marble, I don't think, not in a long time anyway, so I was kind of a bit like, how should I do this? And then I just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna wing it like the rest of the set. But I was really pleased with how the marble turned out. The white marbled in with the pink really easily, and again, because the product doesn't really move unless you move it, it meant I could really create the kind of swirls that I wanted to in the marble. And I just went for a really simple marble design, to be honest. I just swirled the white into that pink, and then of course added a little bit of glitter, because you can't not have glitter in a marble. It really finishes one off. So just tapping that again down into the wet polygel. I've not popped this in to cure just yet. And I'm really sorry if you can hear any noise in the background. It's really, really hot in the room that I'm working in. So I've opened the window and it's all of a sudden got a little bit windy. So I am sorry if you can hear the wind in the background. Now, once I am happy with how the glitter is placed, I'm going to pop this in to cure for 60 seconds. And then because I've added the glitter and the marble effect, this now does need to be encapsulated, but I completely forgot to encapsulate it straight away. So I do encapsulate it further along in the video. But for now, we're going to move on to the little finger. So I really wanted to have a go with doing a full white nail, because I know with some products or some systems, white can be one of the trickier colours to work with. So I was really interested to see what white polygel would be like. And I have to say the white was probably the easiest colour out of the kit to work with. It was, I don't know if maybe because if it's quite pigmented, but it was really smooth and easy to pat into place. So as you can see, I've placed it down, tapped it up around that cuticle area, and I'm just patting it from side to side and walking it down towards that tip of the nail. Again, I wanted quite a medium to thin layer because I wanted to add in some more flowers and then encapsulate. So I didn't want to build the nail up with the white polygel. And when you see my brush go out of shot, that's because if I've picked up a little bit too much of the slip solution, I'm just wiping some of the excess off onto a lint-free pad, just because, like I said, I was trying to be really conscious that I didn't want to add too much of the slip solution onto the polygel. And then I'm going to come and press on some more of the dried flowers. I loved being able to press these into the wet polygel a little bit, because they can be a little bit bumpy, these kind of dried flowers. So it can be a little bit hard to get them to lie flat. And being able to press them down into the wet polygel really helped make sure that they were lying nice and flat, ready to be cured and then encapsulated. And I'm loving flowers in sets of nails at the moment. I'm really loving all the spring vibes. The weather here has been a little bit better. It's still cold, but the sun shines out and you just got that spring is in the air feeling. And I love creating pretty sort of style nails, you know, anything that's got flowers or hearts was quite cute. So these were definitely my kind of nails when it comes to the design. Once I was happy with how those flowers were placed, like I said, I didn't want to press them down into the polygel too much. I'm just making sure that the leaves aren't sticking up, or the petals, sorry, aren't sticking up, so that I can encapsulate them nicely. I then decided to just tap on a little bit of glitter to add a little bit of sparkle, and then I'm going to pop this in to cure for 60 seconds. So now we need to encapsulate those final two nails. So I'm taking a medium sized bead of that clear polygel. I'm kind of trying to place it down on the nail and wriggle it off from my spatula and work it down to where I want it to go anyway. And then I just had a little bit of excess stuck on my spatula, so I scraped that onto the nail as well. Then I'm taking some of that slip solution, really pressing this up towards that cuticle area. We don't want a too bulky cuticle, so that's why I'm taking the product up towards the cuticle rather than placing it directly down at the cuticle area. Then I'm able to leave the bulk of that product in the apex area and kind of just pat it out towards the sidewalls. I'm not having to move it around too much. Just making sure again it fully encapsulates around those flowers. I wasn't worried about creating a too perfect nail. I knew that because it was my first time using it, it wasn't going to be completely even. There was going to be a bit of a lumpy bumpy application, so I kind of just went with it and did as best as I could, knowing that I would be able to come in and file it smoothly further along. But I'm just making sure at this point that the polygel gets right up those sidewalls, that there's no gaps, it's all nicely fully encapsulated over the flowers and the glitter. And I'm also just trying to keep it as neat as I can. I didn't want too much of the polygel to come over the sidewalls. So here is when I realised I hadn't encapsulated that marble nail, so I came in and encapsulated this one as well. Again, doing the exact same, kind of just focusing the polygel down the centre of the nail, and then I'm able to push some up into the cuticle area, trying to not make that too bulky, and then just pressing it out to the sides, leaving the bulk of that product down the centre of the nail. And I have watched quite a few polygel videos recently. That was what made me want to try out polygel, seeing as it has been on the market for a very long time, and it's kind of just been something that I've not really taken too much interest in until recently. But I had heard a few people say that polygel clears are not as clear as, say, builder gels or acrylic clears, so that's why I kind of wanted to have a go at encapsulating with this one to see how clear it would be. Now I have to say I do agree that they're not as clear as acrylic or builder gel. However, this particular one, I was quite impressed with how clear it was. So as you can see over the middle finger where I popped the clear over the flowers, you can still see them. It does still have that quite glass effect to the polygel, and that hasn't been filed or top coated yet. So it does end up looking a little bit clearer as well once I had popped the top coat down over the top. So like I said, this is my first time using it, so I don't have anything to compare it to. Like, I don't have anything to compare this particular brand to. But for a first impressions, I was really impressed with this particular kit from Models One. Now once I had finished encapsulating those two nails, I did pop them into cure before coming in and wiping off the tacky layer. I wanted to wipe off that tacky layer before I come in and file. I did file the pointer finger off camera because I decided I would just leave in filing for one nail. So I'm just going to come in and file this nail. I'm using the 100 grit side of the nail file, but I kind of flicked between using 180 and the 100 grit side of the file. I wanted to focus on using the 100 grit side to remove any of the bumps. You know, it was a little bit bulky where the application wasn't perfect, and then when I'm coming around the cuticle area and shaping up the sidewalls, I switched to using the 180 grit side, and that was because the polygel was really easy to file. So if you work with acrylic, you'll know that that's a little bit harder to file than, say, gel based products. So when it comes to working with the polygel, I did work with it like, or filed it like I would file my builder gels, because it's a softer product, so it does file a lot easier, which was good because it meant I didn't spend too long filing these until I was happy with them, to be honest. I probably spent most of the time on just getting the shape how I wanted it to be. Now I just simply file over the surface of the nail. I'm constantly feeling it and checking it from all angles to make sure it's all nice and smooth and even, that it's contoured nicely, that the apex is in the right place, we haven't got a too bulky cuticle, same that we haven't got too bulky sidewalls. And then I make sure to give them a really good scrub to remove some of the dust from filing, and then here I'm just wiping over them with some alcohol just to make sure they are super clean before we come in and top coat. Now, as I said, the first nail had quite a few bubbles in it. I do believe this was down to my application and nothing to do with the product, because the more I used it throughout the set of nails, I found that I didn't get any bubbles once I was conscious of using it, working with it a little bit slower and just making sure that there was no bubbles before I popped the nails into cure. But I wanted to get a nice picture of this set of nails, so I didn't want to leave this now with lots of bubbles in it. So I decided I would cover those up with some glitter. So I decided I'd go for a sugared effect with the glitter. So I've popped down a layer of the top coat, and then before curing it, I'm sprinkling on some of the glitter that was included in the kit. This is a really pretty pink glitter. I love glitters that have that iridescent effect to them, and I felt as though this one went the best with the overall theme of the set. So all I'm simply doing is sprinkling that on and then shaking off the excess. Then I'm going to come in and top coat the rest of the nails and then pop these in to cure. Now usually if I'm doing sugared glitter, I will double cure just to make sure that glitter has really set in place. So although this top coat only requires a 60-second cure, I cured for 120 seconds just for that sugared effect nail. So when it comes to top coating, I am just making sure to apply a nice thin layer. You don't need anything too thick as you might have trouble curing it. So I'm making sure to keep that nice and thin. This particular top coat as well has quite a thin consistency to it as well. So it's nice for coming over encapsulating nails where you don't need that thicker layer. And then once I had popped these in to cure, I'm just going to use a soft brush to brush off any of that excess glitter. So any pieces that haven't stuck down or that are stuck around the cuticle area. And this, guys, was the finished result. I really enjoyed doing them and I thought they looked super pretty. And I have to say I was quite impressed with my first attempt at using Polygel. So as always, I have listed all the products I've used in the description box below, so do check that out. If you liked the video, then please give it a thumbs up or pop me a comment below. And if you're not already subscribed, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Take care, keep safe, and I shall see you all again soon. Lots of love. Bye bye.